he's had a long-term vision for his brand, and he focuses on getting better and better and better month after month. Revisit your childhood. What were the activities that you repeatedly and voluntarily did when no one was forcing you to do them? No one was judging you or grading you. No one was telling you to do them. What were the things that you continually turn to? Because that's who you are. Life isn't in a ladder progression. It's like a tree, there are certain years that it bears fruit. Other years it's still growing outward in different ways. The most successful people are the ones who don't care as much about the result. They're only focused on the process and how much fun the process is. And as a result of that, as a side effect, they do amazing work. The quote is, ever since I stopped worrying about finances, I've made more money than I ever thought possible.
You are listening to the Optimal Performance Podcast. The OPP is brought to you by Natural Stacks, makers of 100% natural and open source supplements designed to help you live optimal. For more on building optimal mental and physical performance into your life, go to naturalstacks.com. And hey, while you're at naturalstacks.com, visit the blog post for this episode. We're going to give away 3 copies of Charlie's books. Book number 1 will be Play It Away. That will be an audio download as well as a PDF download that accompanies it. And Charlie's also going to be hooking us up with his book, Recession-Proof Graduate. So 3 of you guys listening will win. All you have to do to enter is go to the site, naturalstacks.com, blog post for this, and share this episode of the OPP. That will enter you to win 2 books from Charlie.
Ryan Muncie is probably the smartest guy I know.
Trust me, Muncie is the nutrition guy.
Ryan Muncie's out there trying to make the world better for all of us.
The Optimal Performance Podcast is bold, edgy, creative, entertaining, and epic.
Ryan Muncie is my go-to guy.
Ryan Muncie he's the first guy I call.
He's making people's lives better. Ryan Muncie's an innovator.
This is an amazing episode of the OPP. Charlie Hoehn is a really, really smart guy, really, really in touch with some of the important things in life. And we're going to dive into basically 2 really cool topics. One is on how to improve your networking abilities. Charlie's got an amazing resume. He has worked with Seth Godin, Ramit Sethi, Tucker Max, Tim Ferriss very, very closely. And he's going to outline for us on this show how he got involved with these folks and tell you exactly how you can sort of level up with your social network. And we also talk a lot about play and how we can build that into our lives. That's something that's really important to Charlie, as you'll hear in this podcast. So a little bit more on Charlie, his bio. He's the head of author marketing at Book in a Box. He was the marketing director for Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Body book. He is the author of Play for a Living, Recession-Proof Graduate, and The Anxiety Cure. He's a keynote speaker who has spoken at the Pentagon, multiple U.S. universities, U.S. military bases, TEDx. His work has been published on Tony Robbins, Seth Godin, Noah Kagan's websites, in Forbes, on Lewis Howes' School of Greatness, The Art of Charm, many other top-level platforms. So, when we talk about, Charlie is the guy who can help you understand how to, get your message or get your network to where you want it to be. He's speaking from experience. And he has a lot of amazing tools in his arsenal that he openly shares with us on this show. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. As you listen to this, if anything jumps out at you and you want to share it with the folks in your life that you know who will benefit from and enjoy it, please do. Share this episode of the OPP and the OPP in general. Make sure you go to naturalstacks.com. You'll be able to see the video version of this along with all of the links and resources that we talk about. Charlie mentions a lot of different books and blogs and tons of resources that we will have links to for you on the blog post for this podcast. So go to naturalstacks.com. It'll be under Charlie Hoehn, Hoehn. And last but not least, make sure you go to iTunes. Leave us a 5-star review. If we read your review on the air, we will hook you up with free Natural Stacks products. You know, we always ask you guys for the reviews. And the reason that we do that is these reviews really help our rating on iTunes, which is sort of the gold standard for podcasts. The more reviews we have, the more iTunes thinks the show is better. And we want to incentivize you to do that with the giveaway of free product. So it really helps us if you leave these reviews. It doesn't have to be long. Take 5 minutes, leave us a review. We will read all of them on the air, and we will send you free product because we are super grateful. So here's one from Jonathan K. Jonathan says, howdy, just listened to the AVR podcast, number 105, on a flight from St. Louis to Oakland. And as always, you did a great job. Keep up the work. Jonathan, thank you. Shoot me an email, ryan@naturalstacks.com, and we'll hook you up with whatever you want from Natural Stacks. And remember, book giveaway on this one. So as you listen to this, Charlie's got amazing information. If you want a copy of his book, you can either go buy it or you can enter our giveaway and win 2 of his books plus a PDF download for free, naturalstacks.com. All right, I'm done talking. Here's Charlie. Charlie, welcome to the OPP. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan.
So for our listeners, let's kind of start at a high-level view, and then we'll really dive deep on this concept of play. You've got a fascinating bio. Our listeners just heard that in the introduction. You've done so much, and you've had the opportunity to study under so many high-level people. How did you make that happen?
Well, I made it happen out of desperation. I graduated from college during the recession, and I spent months applying to more than 100 jobs. Never got a response, really. So I was feeling pretty dejected, and so I just said, I'm only going to work on stuff that I care about for the next month. And I'm going to reach out to people that I admire who are doing interesting work. So I started by reaching out to Ramit Sethi, and then ended up working with him. Ended up working with Tucker Max after that. Both of them recommended me to Tim Ferriss, and he and I worked for years together. But it was out of desperation, and I just was pitching those guys to help them with what they were doing and offering my skill set to help them get there faster.
So I want to ask you 2 questions related to this before we move on. You mentioned that you pitched them, you approached them. These are people who get approached by countless people every single day.
Yeah.
What strategies did you use to make your pitch stand out?
Yeah. So, first, if anybody wants to read the exact pitch email that I sent to Tim, it's available online. If you Google the 12 lessons learned while marketing the 4-hour body. So you can see the exact correspondence we had. But basically what I did differently than most other people, most people will say, hey, I'd love to work for you for free. Just tell me what to do. I'd love to help and be involved. I just really admire you. In exchange, maybe you could mentor me or something like that. And that's a bad email because you're making them do the work. You're telling them, hey, think of something for me to do. And you're also putting a really heavy cost on that offer, which is, hey, will you mentor me? I never said that. I've never asked anybody to be my mentor ever. It just happens as a side effect of being around them. So what I offered was something very specific. I said, I really admire your work. I've noticed that you're trying to do this. You know, you're working on this book, so I'd imagine that you're trying to hit the bestseller list, or you're trying to sell X number of copies. or whatever, right? And then I would say, I think there's a potential hole in your current game plan or your current efforts. So, for instance, with Ramit, I said I can tell that you're really ramping up your marketing efforts for your book launch. I noticed that you've done some video in the past, but you don't really do it very often. But it's really good. It's really compelling when you do it. You're probably not doing it because it's cumbersome and it's a lot of work. Why don't I take that over for you? I've got a background in videography. I've done this, and this. Here's a link to my work. How about I take this over for you for free? We'll give it a trial run for 1 or 2 months. We'll see how we like working together. If you don't like my work, forget it. You don't have to use it. There's no ill will from me, and you can go about your life. But if you do like working together, let's talk about how we can work together on a more formal basis in 1 to 2 months. And that's what I said to all of them. And that works really well. It removes all the risks. It absolves them of any guilt they might feel for saying, yeah, okay, work with me for free. And I wrote about this technique in Recession-Proof Graduate. I kind of laid out exactly how people can do that. And it's worked really well for a lot of people. And this is something that tons and tons of really successful people have done as well. Everyone from Warren Buffett to Jim Carrey to, you name. I mean, that's how Hollywood operates basically. But yeah, it works really well.
Yeah, I actually just saw Gary Vaynerchuk put something out last week about using Instagram for networking, and he laid out an almost identical template for people to send direct messages to anybody on Instagram that they want to work with. So his example was somebody who does video. He said, look, send a message to Chance the Rapper, send a message to make a list of 100 people on Instagram, 100 rappers or hip hop artists or country or whatever. And, he said, send them a template, say, I've got a background in video. I can make 30-second videos for your Instagram account for a year. We'll take you from 2.9 to 7 million followers. I won't charge you a thing. And it was very much what you said. And, I think it's cliche to say lead with value, because that's so vague and not specific. And it's easy to just send a blanket templated email it's very generic. And I think you highlighted something very important, to look at what their specific task is. Where's their mind right now? What's going to really resonate with them when they see that in their inbox? Oh man, this can help me with what I'm working on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I remember reading an article of somebody who did exactly what you or what Gary just described as he loved shooting video with his drone camera, and he reached out to his favorite musicians and ended up traveling around the world with them, making little clips with his drone camera at their concerts. And funny enough, Gary was actually one of the first authors I ever consulted because of the exact same offer that I'd made other guys. After Ramit and I marketed his book, we reached out to Gary and said, hey, we'd love to connect. We think we can help you with your upcoming book launch. So, yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people trying this, and the things that they will occasionally get hung up on, or they'll wonder why it's not working, is they will offer to do free work in an area that they aren't skilled in. So you have to be able to show that you are good at something, and not just tell. And it requires effort to get there, and it requires some thought as well. I've seen people offer like, hey, I noticed your business is online or whatever. I'd love to redesign your website because your website looks like it's from the 90s or something, right? But they're not a web designer, right? So they'll just put together something in Squarespace, which maybe for some businesses that'll work, but you have to actually have some skill that you can legitimately jump in there and do stuff with. So
right, and it has to be better than that person's skill in that area. It has to bring up
significantly,
right.
Yeah.
So circling back to the pitch letter that you sent to Tim, for our listeners, I will find that link and we'll put it on the show notes. Either I'll find it or I'll get you to send it to me, Charlie. But speaking of the blog post for this episode, we will be talking later in this episode about Charlie's books, Play It Away, Play for a Living. We're going to do a giveaway. You guys will be able to win an audio download, audio version of the book and a PDF download that accompanies it for Charlie's books. So make sure as you listen to this, kind of make a mental note that you are going to go to the website, naturalstacks.com, visit the blog post for this, and you'll be able to get all of these resources that we talk about as well as enter to win that. But we'll get to the play in a little bit. Right now, I still want to talk about some of the hustle aspect. You have had the unique ability or opportunity to spend time with these high performers, these high level people. When you think about, and I don't want to turn this into a name dropping thing, but when you think about your time with Tim or Ramit or Gary, any of those people, what are some of the big like single lessons that you took away from maybe two or three of those people?
Oh, I've been asked this question. I need to like formally write something out because I've been asked this question a lot. And each time I'm like, I don't even know where to begin because I learned so much from all of them.
Well, that should be, it's a book idea for you, right? Like what I learned from
what I learned from
X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
Yeah. Ramit, it's been really cool to see his progression because he and I started working together in 2008, right? 2008, 2009. And now it's 2017. And he's one of the more reputable, like content creators in the world right now. It's unbelievable. And if you look at the way his website started, way back when, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell that this guy was going to build a really successful business that really impacted a lot of people's lives. And I think what I learned from him, because he was kind of the first guy I worked with, was he had a really long-term vision for the brand. And even though I Will Teach You to Be Rich kind of speaks to people who don't have, wealth and might be like, ooh, work from home type audience. His material is anything but that, right? And so he's had a long-term vision for his brand, and he focuses on getting better and better and better month after month. And it really shows. So I've just admired his ability to continually level up, both as a person and as a business owner, over the long run, and to continually do that. With Tucker, I just as a human being, I've learned you should never judge a book by its cover. If everybody judged him based on his most popular materials, which most people do, they would just assume he's a narcissistic ass. And he certainly has those qualities in him, but don't we all? Like we all have these traits, and he's been one of the most loyal and generous friends I've ever known, and one of the most supportive people. The amount of emotional intelligence he has, he's been a proactive mentor in my life. Like he goes out of his way to mentor me, to help me with areas that he sees me struggling in before I even ask for help. And that's made a real impact on me, not only in how I see him as a person, but also has given me pause and to think of how I can do that for others, to reach out and to help them. With Tim, gosh, he's just a force of nature. He's just incredible. He would make these jokes back in the day of like, it's why I wanted to work with him, because I knew he was a really smart, capable person. But he would make these jokes like, I'm on my 14th minute of my 15 minutes of fame with the 4-hour work week, and then the 4-hour body hit, and then the 4-hour chef hit, then Tools of Titans hit, and then he had his own TV show, and he has another TV show coming, and he had a TV show before that. And setting a goal, an ambitious goal for yourself, is something I really learned from Tim. And I don't have as strong of I'm a different person, right? I don't have as strong of a desire to conquer and set these lofty goals. But I mean, I know that if you do, you can accomplish amazing things. So Tim, I'm most indebted to. He's been super supportive, and he gave me, I think what I learned from him, he gave me so many assignments that were out of my comfort zone that I don't think anybody has built up my confidence more than him, apart from my parents,
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that stretched you the most?
Oh, definitely. 4-hour body was not like a thing that I didn't think I could accomplish. When we were editing that, I was helping him edit that book, and then we launched the book, which are two very different modalities of work, right? So editing the book was physically taxing. Launching the book was mentally and physically taxing, because you're having to coordinate all these different details and like get everything right, and it's all a very big rush. But we did both, and I thought, if anybody can do this, it's us. We could pull this off. The opening the kimono event, I thought, really stretched my limitations in what I was capable of. Like, nothing scared me more than the lead up to that event, because it was 130 people all across the world who'd paid $10,000 to come to an event, a 4-day event retreat in Napa Valley. And my experience in event planning before that was throwing a kegger in my garage in college. So it was daunting, to say the least. But
so you actually had to implement a lot of Tim's like accelerated learning tactics to become effective at doing that.
Yeah. I mean, Tim's much more methodical than I am. I'm just like, I'm in a frantic rush to just figure stuff out. I asked for help, and I got it, fortunately. This woman named Susan Dupre, who's a great friend now, she reached out, and she actually said, I'd like to help you guys for free. Here's my resume. I helped Steve Jobs launch the original iPhone. I worked with James Cameron. I used to work with the cast of The Sopranos and planning their events. I used to work with Julia Childs. Like, she had a ridiculous resume, right? And at first I was like, this isn't a real person.
Right. Why is this person reaching out and willing to do it for free?
Yeah. And you know why? It was really smart. When I realized why she did that, was she did an amazing job, and both she and I got all the credit for pulling off, not all the credit, but we got a lot of credit for pulling off a great event. And I truly couldn't have done it without her. So we, I mean, she was amazing.
And that leads to more work and, more influence, more impact for her, which is, again, it kind of circles back to what you were saying at the beginning. You're offering to help people with something for free. And
yeah, I mean, like if your number one issue in getting somebody to pay you $20 to $50 to $100,000 for planning an event is they need to know, like, and trust you first, then she made the best possible move she could have made, right? Mm-hmm. She just gained the trust of 130 people who are potential buyers. Wow.
That's a great example. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about play. So you've got the book Play It Away and then the recent project Play for a Living. How did you sort of get into play and why did it become something that is obviously so important to you?
Yeah, I got into it because I deprived myself of it for a long time unknowingly. And I went through a period. I used to think of it as burnout, but the more I've learned about burnout, the more I've come to understand that it's really just clinical depression. And this was after the kimono event where I just felt exhausted. I had been on these pills, that had kept me awake for the majority of the event. So over the course of 4 days, I slept a total of 6 hours. And I was still able to function because these pills are really powerful. But when I got back, I just physically fell apart. And it was after that point that I kind of had an emotional and mental shift in work and thinking, okay, things are about the bottom line. It's time to be productive. It's time to be successful. It shifted away from, like, I just want to do this stuff because it's fun. It's exciting. It's meaningful. And I just need enough money to keep that game going. It became very much like numbers driven, results driven, like very serious. Mm-hmm. And I'd never really operated that way in my life that I could really recall. Everything was kind of approached differently, except in school. There are certain things that you just have to behave that way. But so I went through a long period where it just kind of felt like more of a grind than the pleasure of doing work you're really proud of. And I quit my job with Tim because there was on one weekend, a family member died, a close friend attempted suicide. The book that we were working on, the deadline got extended 6 months, and just physically I was exhausted, and it was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And I just felt like I can't really keep going right now. I can't envision myself like snapping back and being okay. So I just need to stop. And thankfully Tim was really gracious about that. It was really scary to quit that job. And I took some time off. Sorry, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, I'm sure that was a scary thing he seems like, there are some people where like I would like a Tim or a Gary V to go to them and be like, wow, like, dude, I need to take care of my own health. I need to slow down. Like there are some people where I would be afraid to say that to because they seem so like almost like a machine in their drive and their ability to do that. Like you said, he's a force of nature. But I'm curious. I mean, you said you were getting ready to say like you took that time off. I mean, what did you do? How did you recover? How did you kind of bounce back and find yourself again in that kind of sweet spot of doing it because you want to, not because you're chasing the bottom line?
Well, I wish I could say, Ryan, that I was really smart about it and I took care of myself, but I didn't. Things actually got worse because I realized like, oh my God, I don't have a paycheck coming in anymore. I'm living in downtown San Francisco. What am I thinking? And I was worried I'd burned a bridge. I didn't know what I wanted to do next, and I felt really guilty that I wasn't working and being productive and doing something meaningful. And so, like, I had these sudden like aspirations, like I got to do something significant. Like I got to. I remember at that time, Facebook just purchased Instagram for $1 billion, and I was talking to a friend, my friend Chad Moretta, and he was launching a book called App Empire. And I read his book, and I thought it was really interesting, and I was kind of fascinated with the whole app space, and I was like, well, this could be a fun thing to learn for a while. And he had another guy working with him named Jason Adams, and all three of us were just like, we knew our stuff in marketing. And so we launched a product a couple months later called the App Empire online course, which just taught people how to build your first app and to create your first business as an appreneur. And that did really well. We did it. I directed the course, the video course. So I just kind of was behind the camera and telling them what to do and stuff. And I edited a lot of the course, and then we sold the course for $2,000. And it did about 2.6 million in revenue over the course of 10 days. And I remember the next day, just walking on the beach by myself in a very dramatic fashion. But just thinking like, gosh, I still feel the same. I still feel kind of like this, like I'm just beat up inside or like there's kind of this hollowness that I just can't really get my head around. And I took a little bit more time off, and over the next year, I tried everything I could find to get out of this state where things had gotten really bad because I was chronically sleep deprived. I was having like panic attacks. My body was just overly sensitive. I suddenly was like kind of fearful in social interactions, and like I constantly had this sense that people were like judging me or trying to manipulate me or pitting me, like that. I was paranoid, right? And it was like I just had never really felt that way before in my life, where I had this like constant sense of dread. My heart felt different. I couldn't breathe the same. There was just, it was different and it was miserable. It felt like hell, to be honest. Because when you have panic attacks, it's like your brain's like, you're going crazy, you're going to die. And that feels very real. So it's frightening. So I was trying to I kept that a secret. No one really knew that I felt that way. My girlfriend at the time kind of could tell something was going on, but anyway, so I was trying everything to kind of remedy this and get myself back to normal. And so I was meditating, I was doing yoga, deep breathing, journaling, volunteering, seeing a therapist, seeing multiple therapists, trying every supplement, exercising, fasting, you name it. Nothing really helped. And it was really frustrating because I remember spending money on a 6-week course for men who were struggling with anxiety. And I got through the course and I still felt the same. And just thinking on all the things that I'd tried, all the money I'd spent, all the energy I'd put into figuring out this problem, and feeling like, well, the rest, this is I make the joke that everybody always said to me when I was a kid, like, just wait until you get into the real world. And if that was the real world, then I finally got it. And I just didn't see any, I didn't look forward to the rest of life, and the turning point was when I just stumbled across a book at Tucker Max's apartment called Play by Stuart Brown. And I read that book and in one sitting. And the book was fascinating because it's about the evolutionary benefits of play. Why do mammals play? Why do humans play more than any other species? Because you can deny work, right? Like, work is something we put upon ourselves. A child won't work if given the opportunity, but you can't prevent. It's very difficult to prevent human beings from playing. Like, that is as effortless and natural as breathing. And it's a huge part of our development process. It's what's allowed us to thrive as a species. It allows us to gain skills that actually keep us alive, but it also encourages us to explore our environment. It allows us to develop empathy and compassion. It is how we learn. It is how life is continually fun and exciting, rather than a joyless grind. And as I was reading this book, there was just so many fascinating things, light bulbs that were going off. Like, I was reading these studies that they'd done where serial killers in jail, when they were revisiting their childhood, they realized all of them had been chronically deprived of play during their entire childhood, like restricted. That they'd done experiments on chimps and rats where they gave them everything they needed to survive. So love, food and water, shelter, but they would stop them from playing, and all of them would grow up to be socially and emotionally crippled. They would have these disorders where they were afraid of their environment. They were afraid of their peers. And I just started to put the pieces together and thinking, like, maybe play is actually the solution. And there was a line in the book that said the opposite of work isn't, or the opposite of play isn't work, it's depression. And when I read that, I just thought, well, maybe I just need to reincorporate play. And there's an exercise in the book called the play history exercise, which is you just revisit your childhood. What were the activities that you repeatedly and voluntarily did when no one was forcing you to do them? No one was judging you or grading you. No one was telling you to do them. What were the things that you continually turn to? Because that's who you are as a person. That's what you're naturally drawn to, without any of this thinking going on up here. That's just who you are. Mm-hmm. And so I did that exercise, and I realized, like, the things that I have always been drawn to are like baseball, playing catch and home run derby. I've always been drawn to playing practical jokes. I have always been drawn to creating my own art and building things with my hands. I've always been drawn to like filming funny sketches with my friends. So doing things where we're like being playful, making things up. Mm-hmm. And so I started giving some thought, like, all right, I'll just do these things for as much as I possibly can. So it started the next day when a friend introduced me to his friend in Austin, and he said, "Hey, this guy emailed me and he said, 'Hey, Charlie, like, we should meet up. Let's grab coffee.'" And I just thought for a second, and then I wrote back, like, "Why don't we go play catch at the park instead?" And we ended up doing that, and it was great, of course. But I came back to work on my laptop later that day. And for the first time, I really had this feeling like a little bit of a weight had fallen off my shoulders, whether it was in my head or physically. I think because before that, I was going to the gym and kind of grinding things out, and it was another job. It wasn't like a joyful activity. And so I just started doing that more and more each day. I would incorporate something. So I was doing practical jokes wherever I can. I started filming sketches with my buddy Tim, and that's what ultimately led me to signing up for improv lessons. For somebody who's struggling with anxiety or depression, improv sounds like a nightmare, but it's one of the best things you can do, because improv illuminated this handicap I had in my mind, which was constantly judging and criticizing myself, and saying no, not good enough. And like improv forces you to say yes to literally everything that happens to you and be cool with it and act like it's the perfect thing that's happened to you. And that's how life is when you're a kid, that's how you are when you're a kid. Whatever happens, for the most part, you're cool with, and you run with that. And reverting to that state really was, I don't know. It's just within a month, I didn't have any of the symptoms that I was just talking about. They just kind of vanished, and it was easy. It was really fun, and it was liberating.
That's a really powerful story. So there's a lot in there for our listeners to sort of pull out, digest, implement. And, it's interesting as you talk about, you mentioned kind of grinding it out at the gym. I think that's one thing I really want to highlight, because I think a lot of us have, as you said, sort of at the beginning of that, you tried everything. You tried the meditation, the breathing, the gratitude journaling, all those things that we build into our daily lifestyle. And it's not to say that they're not good practices, but a lot of times they can feel forced, and you can feel like you're doing it to get a certain benefit, like you're doing it as a means to an end, where, a kid doesn't do that. When a kid plays, it's just, hey, there's a ball, I'm going to dribble it. I'm going to throw it repeatedly up against this wall for 30 minutes. And that these are things that we don't do as adults. And a few episodes ago, we sort of started to touch on this on the podcast. I believe it was episode 107, maybe 105. It was Adam Van Rothfelder. So if you guys haven't listened to that one, go back and check it out. But we talked about sort of like maybe a surfer taking a CrossFit class to sort of decompress, or a CrossFit athlete. CrossFit is not play if you're a CrossFit athlete. But if you're a professional surfer and you just show up to a CrossFit gym and you have fun, then that is play, or it could be play. It's more about the intent that we have as we go into an activity. So that same, like the CrossFit athlete who goes and surfs, the surfing may be fun and relaxing, where for the surfer, if you're Kelly Slater or Laird Hamilton, if it's a competition, it may not be play. And I think, like, to your point about going to the gym and grinding it out, so many of us have these things in our life where we run, or we hike, or we go to the gym and lift. And I've been as guilty as anybody of thinking, all right, I'm getting movement, I'm getting activity, I'm going and lifting, but it's not play. It's not the same thing. And I was really lucky. Last week, we went up, my wife's father has been ill, and we went up and visited them. She took him to a doctor's appointment. We took him to her sister's house, and her sister cuts his hair, shaves him. And while they were doing that, they happened to have a glass backboard basketball goal, and it was like set at like 8 feet, and there's just a basketball laying there. And I'm like, all right, while you guys do this, I'm going to go outside. And I was just like a kid. There's a ball, there's a low goal. I'm just going to dunk. And I did that for 5 or 10 minutes. And the entire time I had the biggest grin on my face, and it completely changed my demeanor. Your physiology changes, your outlook on life changes, everything changes. And sort of like you said, the next time I was back at my computer, I was in a completely different mood. I had this project that had seemed like a source of stress, and then I couldn't wait to get back and knock it out. I think I'm glad that I had that opportunity to experience that before we recorded this show, because I think it really highlights for me how important and how powerful it is. And for you guys listening, I love what you just said, Charlie, about from the book Play, where you think about what you did as a kid, and that, because that's who you are. Like, do those things, because that's what I did as a kid. We used to lower the basketball goal and dunk and play home run derby, and some of my best memories in college are playing home run derby that we used to do as kids. And
Right.
I think that's awesome. So I want to ask you a couple of questions as you researched and wrote the book. I think one of my big questions is, what happens between childhood and adulthood? Why do adults stop playing? Why do we lose that passion, that uninhibited ability to just drop what we're doing in the moment and just completely shift gears and go into play mode?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a flood of testosterone at a certain age that just fundamentally shifts your behavior for guys, right? So you've seen Stand By Me, right? The movie?
Yeah.
Do you remember the end, the final line of the movie?
Oh, I haven't seen it in a while. I don't remember that.
Let me look it up because I don't want to. Yeah. So the final line is, I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone? And I think there's this shift at a certain age that it is, a biological or a physiological change in how we operate. It becomes much more about status, right? We instead of being just friends, like, we measure ourselves in terms of status and prestige and where we kind of fall. And there's good in that, but if you lose touch with who you are, if you're solely driven by status, it's just, man, it makes life brutal and miserable.
And I think it's easy for somebody to say that if they haven't attained status or achieved certain levels. And I think the most powerful thing about the story that you've already shared with us from your experience is, if you want to call it your low point, but that worst point for you right before that turning point was right after a multi-million-dollar successful launch. So it's not like you're saying, I was broke and poor and didn't have things. Like, you certainly, from that status, I guess, pursuit, externally one would see, oh, well, he made it, or he got where, what we're chasing. But as most of us find out, when you chase that thing and you get there, that's not what leads to fulfillment in life. No
one will remember me for that launch.
Right.
They'll remember me because I made them laugh or something. It doesn't matter. I think the thing is, I think the way that we kind of go through modern life of every year's another level. So you're constantly under this illusion for the most formative years of your life that every year is a level up. And if you're not constantly on this forward linear track in life, then you're doing something wrong, right? Which is why people freak out when they haven't made $1 million by 40, or they haven't gotten married by the time they're 30, and they haven't had kids and traveled the world by the time they're 35, right? But life isn't in a ladder progression. It's like a tree, there are certain years that it bears fruit. Other years it's still growing outward in different ways. And your question's a great one. It's just difficult to answer because there's so many different things going on. It's a bad thing to measure yourself by a profoundly sick society. And I think there is a lot of sickness and that comes from like the society that we live in, and how many stories are there of people who got exactly what they wanted and succeeded on a wild level and were miserable at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's super common. So being a person of significance rather than of success is a lot more sustainable, I think.
I like that. Significance over success. Charlie, where can our listeners get more of you?
Oh, they can get more of me wherever I am. No, they can, if they look me up on Google, Charlie Hoehn. If you want to read the original posts about how I overcame anxiety, just Google anxiety cure. It should be the first thing that comes up. And I'm also on Amazon. My books are there, and I guess we are doing a giveaway. So,
yep, we are. You want to explain that?
I would actually love for you to explain it, because whatever you think is going to work best,
Okay.
I'm happy to do.
All right, let's do this. So you mentioned that you can have the book available for our listeners as an audio book plus a PDF download.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do that. And let's say 3 lucky listeners will get a copy of that book. And it'll be the book, Play It Away.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I'll throw in the audiobook for Recession-Proof Graduate as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that one talks more about some of the stuff that we highlighted in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
So for you guys listening, go to naturalstacks.com, and on the blog post for this podcast, we will have an entry form, and that's where you can sign up and enter to win this giveaway. And we'll put I guess what we'll do is we'll make the entry. What you have to do to enter is share this podcast so that we can help this story reach more people and help more people learn how to make themselves more useful as a human and help more people, but also to incorporate play into their lives and, sort of avoid those pitfalls that so many of us fall into. Everything that we've talked about here, I think this is a super helpful episode on so many different levels. So Charlie, I'm very grateful for you sharing all of this information with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Couple other questions for you. These will be a little bit more rapid fire, less deep.
Sure.
The last practical joke you played.
Oh, great question. Hun, what was the last prank or practical joke you remember me playing?
On me?
Just in general. I'm asking my wife right now. Sorry. Stand by. I'm trying to remember.
So maybe you haven't been playing enough recently.
Well, yeah. I mean, so we had April's Fool. I'll tell you, we had April Fools semi-recently. And I work at Book in a Box, and Tucker Max is the co-founder of the company. And one of the things that drives him crazy is if people post a question in the wrong Slack channel. Like, it drives him nuts. And so I had a spreadsheet laid out for every single person in the company to ask a question in a wrong channel on that day. Like, I had the time slots that they were going to post, and we were just going to watch him like lose his mind. But it fell on a Saturday. So we were like, okay, we have to save this. And I know I've pulled I pull a lot, but I can't. That was the last one that I remember putting some thought into.
I love that, because we use Slack at Natural Stacks, and I can totally see like people losing their shit over that kind of thing. That's hilarious.
What about you?
Oh man. Well, I'm not a huge practical joker. I think like the play thing, I told you the basketball goal and some impromptu dunking, which I think for me that it was like I sort of built into the question I asked you, where I am now more aware of play. So I'm trying to be more open at any given moment on any given day to just drop what I'm doing and play for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You know, we live at the beach, and
Nice.
My wife and I, this was yesterday, this past weekend it was the first weekend where we were both home, not traveling, not working in like a month and a half. So we just said, you know, both days we're going to the beach, spent 2 or 3 hours each day at the beach. And as I'm on the beach, I watch people. I like to see what people do and how they engage with their world. And it's so fascinating to watch kids at the beach. They're doing flips in the sand, and they're rolling around, they're doing whatever. And adults, you can tell that they're just there to sort of decompress, get away from everything, and they're just kind of laying right, lie still. And it's like, you know, I see these kids, like real small children, and they have no regard for how sandy they're going to get, or, you know, and I can just like, I saw one kid, they were sitting Indian style in a circle, and the one little boy just does a backflip, and I'm like, you know, that's so cool, from a movement standpoint, because, you know, that's my background. But then, you know, the mentality of that is like, oh, I could do that. And then immediately my first thought was like, oh, I get so sandy. And I'm like, what the hell's wrong with me? Like, where does that happen, you know, in our evolution? But yeah, I guess play for me would be like the dunking and going to the beach and just sort of getting in the water and just doing dumb shit in the water, like, you know, whatever. Like when you watch a kid playing in the waves, they do stuff that adults don't do. And I've really started watching children. You know, we recently traveled, and I heard a kid at the airport telling another adult that wasn't his parent, you know, that we live in Virginia Beach. There's a big Navy presence. So this kid's father is a pilot, and this kid was saying, you know, I'm going to be a fighter pilot. And the conviction that kids have with their dreams is so strong, and it's incredible to me. And, you know, that's one of the things I've been kind of meditating on, is at what point do we lose that conviction? And there was another one where a kid was on the beach and he was practicing his home run swing. So if you grew up playing baseball, I'm sure you used to do this. And, you know, he had his wiffle ball bat. He didn't even have a ball, but you could just tell he'd practice his home run swing. He was watching it. He'd salute it, and then he'd flip his bat. And I'm like, you know, kids don't practice failure. They practice success, or they visualize success.
That's a great point.
He wasn't visualizing striking out. He was visualizing hitting a home run. And I just think that, like, when you go through life like that, you're going to be so much happier and so much more successful. So I think for me, it's watching that, looking for examples like that, and trying to sort of build that into my life. I
love that. I think that's what you just said, of kids practice for success and not failure. I think that's the exact reason that everybody should at least try improv at least once, just to be aware of how often your mind is bracing for failure. It's just, you have no idea how often it's actually happening until it gets pointed out to you, and you're forced to do the opposite of it. And then, you know, what you were talking about with the kid practicing his home run swing made me think about, there's this crazy documentary called Trophy Kids. And it is the most like depressing thing to watch, because I loved baseball from a very early age. And by the time I was 18, I was like ready to quit, because each year it gets increasingly more competitive and more of a job, and more of a thing that's just like, you forget why you were doing it in the first place. And Trophy Kids shows like these kids who are raised by these maniacal parents who see their kids as like the future Tiger Woods or the next Michael Jordan, and they treat them as like, look, you got to get up early on Saturday mornings, and I'm going to verbally abuse you for the next 3 hours and make you. It's like, it is a symptom of like our society of this, like, win above all else, rather than like fun should come first. And I think the irony is, and that's why I did the book Play for a Living, is the most successful people are the ones who don't care as much about the result. They're only focused on the process and how much fun the process is. And as a result of that, as a side effect, they do amazing work, right? So it's this weird paradox where if you take your eye off of what you're like ultimately trying to accomplish and just focus on like enjoying the process as much as possible, you end up doing amazing work.
Yeah. I love it because, coming from health and fitness, being a strength coach and helping people with like their nutrition goals or their workout goals, I always told them focus on the action, not the outcome. And so many people in that health and fitness dieting realm, the goal is outcome based. And I've always said, look, if your goal is to lose 10 pounds in a month and you get to the end of the month and you lost 9 pounds, you're going to view that as a failure, which it's not. I mean, you lost 9 pounds in a month. That's great. But if you look at the actions that are required to make that happen, I'm going to eat right 90% of the time. I'm going to learn what is eating right. I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to not buy junk food. I'm going to buy the right foods. I'm going to work out X times a week, and you make those things happen. Not only will you be more successful in the short term, and you deframe, good, bad, failure, right or wrong, and you focus on those actions, but you're building healthy habits into your lifestyle. And it's very fascinating to me, entering the world of business now, or to see that sort of process entering the world of business, and people like all of the guys that you've worked with, and the stuff that you're bringing in with Play for a Living, Play It Away, and I think it's so cool. And you hear so many entrepreneurs and business people talk about it. I mean, I know Richard Branson comes to mind, and a lot of other people, and it's weird to think that like, okay, I'm going to have the most success by not focusing on outcome or success. But it's a powerful shift.
It is a powerful shift. I was lucky enough to be on James Altucher's podcast recently, and we were talking about this exact topic. And he said, I really feel that I wasted 10 years of my life being focused on money. And he was like, and I'm not exaggerating when I say I wasted 10 years of my life worrying about money, because when I stopped doing that, and the reason he said this was because he read a quote by Bryan Cranston in Play for a Living, the guy who played Walter White in Breaking Bad. Mm-hmm. And the quote is, "Ever since I stopped worrying about finances, I've made more money than I ever thought possible." And that's like the exact dynamic we're talking about, is being so focused on the number rather than the work that creates the number as a side effect.
So I just want to highlight that. That's Bryan Cranston in Play for a Living, and that's your latest project.
Yeah,
that's the coffee table book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your website where people can find all of these books, would you prefer them to go to Amazon or go to your website?
So Play for a Living actually isn't on Amazon yet. But if you look up charliehoehn.com, there's a page called books, and that's just a link to all my books that are available so far. We launched Play for a Living on Kickstarter, so I'm still fulfilling those initial orders right now.
Gotcha. So for you guys listening, if it's easier for you, just go to naturalstacks.com. On the blog post for this, I will have links to everything that we've talked about, all the resources, all of the websites, blog posts, and everything. Last question.
You've given me an idea though, Ryan. I'm just thinking now, like it'd be nice for me to keep track of how many practical jokes I play throughout the year, and just have like a running list of that. Because I listen to a podcast that is totally just like a guy's type of podcast, right? It's called the Big Three Podcast, where it's just these three guys, and they just mess with this one guy like the whole podcast. Like it's all it is them setting him up to get angry and lose his mind like as often as possible in the most ridiculous ways possible. And like, if my wife listened to 3 minutes of it, she'd be like, "This is dumb." Mm-hmm. But I love that stuff. Right. And I find it so funny to push people's buttons and to get them going. So I think I was thinking of the Seinfeld thing that was the Seinfeld calendar thing that went famous in entrepreneur circles a while back, like just marking off every day. Did you do one thing that made you laugh, sort of thing?
I like it. I like that. Final question, Charlie. We want to know your top 3 tips to live optimal. And I'm guessing play is one of them.
Jeez. I would honestly just say, like, get enough sleep, play with friends, and eat food. Like, don't freak out so much about doing everything right. I think just if you do those 3 things generally, like, you're going to be pretty happy. The thing I think most about is I think about The Power of Clan. It's this book on where they looked at parts of the country that were very high in cardiovascular disease and very low. And this one part of the country stumped the doctors because they were like, wow, these people have such low rates of cardio disease, and they're doing everything wrong. They're eating tons of meat. They're very inactive. They work in like coal mines and stuff. They smoke like chimneys. They stay up late, getting wasted all the time. And the one thing they really had was a tight-knit community. It was a tribe of people that really took care of each other. And I think that's the biggest struggle with the shift, the cultural shifts we've had, right? Of work changing to be much more freelance. Everybody's a freelancer or a contractor or a consultant. It's harder to have a regular tribe of people that you meet with every day and surround yourself with, plus the nature of a lot of young people moving all around the country. So it makes it tougher, but I think about that a lot, of how can you build that community around you and have that. So if you can pull that off, I think the times I'm happiest are the times where I find I have that strongest in my life.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's a very powerful thing, to be surrounded by like-minded and supportive, positive people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a great way to end it. Charlie, thanks again for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing all this information. For you guys listening, go to naturalstacks.com. Blog post for this episode will have all the links and resources for you to pursue and follow up on, as well as the giveaway. You will get the audio and the PDF for Play It Away, as well as the audio for Recession-Proof Graduate, and share the OPP with anybody that you think of in your life who will benefit from the things we've talked about today. And of course, go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. Let us know how much you like this show. And if we read your review on the air, we will hook you up with free Natural Stacks products. That's it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Charlie, thanks again, man.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it, man.